Hello and welcome back to my Dandelion Diaries. Today we are going to be doing another ink exploration, and today is all about blue inks. So quick caveat, I'm going to try to do inks that are not just your standard blue. I have picked a selection of inks. Every single one is a different brand, and I think there is something unique about each one of these that is not just like a boring blue ink, if you will. Like each one of these has a characteristic to them. As for supplies, this is a Sterling Ink A5 notebook with the Sanzen Tomoe paper. I have my Olive Frogs Designs sample vial holder. I will be using my Seilo Hokoro dip pen today with the Fude nib, and then I have a dropper and my little acrylic stamp block, which is what I use to make the circle swatches. My t-shirt over here as my little towel, and then some jars of water. And I'm going to go ahead and get started because there are 18 inks, that I'm going to be working with. And the first one is going to be an ink that was sent to me by a pen friend, Jana Lyon. Thank you so much. This is Anderillium's Flying Squid Blue. And one thing that I've really enjoyed about this ink is its depth. It is super saturated and vibrant. It just has this overall richness to it. I have yet to put this in a pen, I will say that, because it is still a pretty new ink to me. I've been playing around with it with dip pens and swatching and just kind of coloring, if you will, but I'm really a fan of the flow in like painting and dip nibs with this because it's just very smooth. So I feel like in a fountain pen it will perform very well. Overall though, again, color, it is a nice saturated blue, but it has a bit of a red sheen to it and also a very minor amount of shading, but not enough that I would consider it substantial shading. Next up, we have a Birmingham Pen Company ink. This is one I mixed myself. I will try to put the ingredients from the Atomic collection on the screen or in the description for this one, but it is Salted Sea Breeze. And I really enjoy this one because of the shading. I have been in my shading inks era for a hot minute now. The color of this is a bit more of a muted blue. It has kind of a greenness to it, maybe even a yellow. The shading does kind of go more towards the gray side, I would say, but I'll wait to fully describe that once it's dry because I find that the Birmingham Pen Company inks just look entirely different depending on what paper you're using. Sometimes they're a completely different color if it's on like rodeo paper versus the Sanzen paper, or even the Aerofil paper versus the Cosmo Aero Light. Like it's just these inks vary differently depending on the paper. But I like the color of this one because it is a bit more muted, but also because of, again, the shading. Next up, we have Colorverse Rainy Day. And this is a gorgeous shading ink. I do find it to be a little bit dry in pens, and it might be because of the slightly lighter color that it has. I find that with Colorverse inks, if it's a lighter color, they tend to be a bit drier than their darker colors. But this color in general is, again, more of like a dustier blue, a more muted blue. I don't want to call it washed out because it's still very saturated. It has a very pigmented look, but it's not made with pigment. I think that the shading in this ink is really what sells it for me though, especially on the Tomoe paper, the original one. But on the Sanzen, I have found that it behaves just the same, that it has a gorgeous kind of duotone shade to it as well. I did notice, I just want to do a really quick blurb here, that the Colorverse brand is offering an ink vent this year in 2024, which is very exciting. So if you would want to see that, let me know in the comments because I'm tempted to get it. I'm going to do the Diamine ink vent again, but I'm tempted to get the Colorverse one too. So let me know if you want to see something like that in the comments. Next up, we have a DeAtrramentis ink, and this is Atlantic Blue. And this one is a bit more of a standard blue. Again, it has this almost like purple black undertone to it though, which is really pretty. It doesn't really shade a whole lot, and I don't remember it having a sheen. It might have some just because blue inks typically, I don't know, saturated blue inks typically have one, but I don't remember this one having a sheen. One thing I love about the DeAtrramentis brand is their inks are always extra flowy. Like no matter what ink I pick from them, it flows phenomenally in a pen. I will say they can be a little too wet sometimes to where they cause feathering and even bleed through, but I've only experienced that in their Document line of inks, which are the pigmented inks. So I'm not really sure. I don't really know if it's just that line or what, but it doesn't really happen to me on any other papers other than things like Rhodia for some reason. Anyways, very well flowing ink brand, and this color is a beautiful deep saturated blue as well. Next up, we have one of my personal favorites, and this is Diamine Celadon Cat, and I believe this was based on the colors picked from the fountain pen Reddit thread. So they had a couple of ones come out, and I think this was one of them, and I think Sailor's Warning might have been the other one, but this is a beautiful, beautiful blue. This ink specifically is one of my favorites because, again, shading, I just am in my shading era, and that's because this shades very well from like a lighter, dusty, washed out blue to a bit more of a darker green tealy blue in some areas, but it also has a bit of a grayness to it. I don't really think this ink could only be categorized in a blue family. I think it would do really great in the teal family, and I think it would also do really great in a gray family. It has a very dynamic look to it. My only complaint with it is that it is a bit dry, so I like to put this in a water flowing pen like my Bennu Euphoria or my Esterbrook Estes. I just think this ink does really well in a wet flowing pen. In a drier flowing pen, I've put this in my Pilot Metropolitan that has a bit of a dry problem. It just does not want to go. So it just depends on your pen preference here. I do want to say that this ink is also a bit light. So in super fine nib pens, it comes very, very light across the page versus like a medium to a broad nib situation. It is a bit darker and shows a bit more of the shading. Next up, we have a Dominant Industry ink, and this is part of their Pearl series, and this is Milky Way Blue. And this is another one of those super saturated, lovely blue inks. And it has red sheen and a very minor amount of shimmer to it as well. I don't know if it's the sample I got. I got the sample from Pen Chalet, but I feel like I didn't get a whole lot of shimmer with this one. So I don't really know exactly how shimmery it is from the bottle situation. I will say Dominant Industries shimmer though, I've never had a clog with theirs. I feel like their shimmer particles are pretty standard in size. They're not super large. So just take that with a grain of salt if you like shimmer inks. I think this ink looks great without shimmer too, since I can't really tell if it has enough in it or not, but the base color of this is a very nice saturated blue. It does lean a bit more on the purple red side though, so it could be considered even a blurple, especially with the red sheen that it has going on. Next up, we have a new ink as of 2024, and this is from Endless Alchemy, and this is Candy Sea. I only got a sample of this one because I got a full bottle of the green version they had of this, but the bottles from this brand are absolutely like super cool. It's like a science experiment. They're like the Erlenmeyer flasks. And the color of Endless Alchemy's Candy Sea is again another saturated royal blue color. It has a bit of a green undertone, so it's not super blue to me. Like it wouldn't be a blue I would consider like your standard, you know, Roy G. Biv blue, but it is a lovely, lovely shade. It is very saturated, very, very, you know, opaque, and the special quality of this one I would give is the red sheen that it has, which again is kind of common with blue inks, but this one just looks really nice together with the shade of blue that it's with. I think this ink is really nice. I think the bottle is fantastic, that it looks like a really cool flask and that you get 60 mils. I just think that it's, you know, it's another blue ink. This one's not as special to me, but it is a very pretty color. Then we have Ferris Press's Storied Blue. And I specifically wanted to put this one next to Celadon Cat because they look very, very similar. And that's because of the shading. Again, Storied Blue is a bit more blue. It has a little less of a green-yellow undertone, but the shading does go gray, very, very close to the way Celadon Cat goes gray. So in the end, when these dry down, we'll get to see what they look like side by side. And if you have one brand preference over the other, it could definitely make a turning point on which ink you pick up if you want a full bottle of either one of them. Next up, we have a Kaweco ink, and this is Royal Blue. And this is a lovely royal blue color. Although I don't feel like it's quite royal blue because it does have a bit of a purpleness to it, which is what I would consider its more unique quality in a blue ink. But also it does have the kind of little bits of shading that has been standard with all the Kaweco inks that I have tried, which is kind of like a grayer yellow shade. It doesn't go full on, you know, gray yellow shade. That would be really cool, but it's just like a slight undertone of that shading. This ink writes beautifully. I think I don't know, there's just a nice juicy quality to it, and in pens it just behaves really well and has a nice kind of velvety feel with writing. I think all of the Kaweco inks are really great. I think their color range is a bit limited, but they do offer, I think, almost every single one of their colors in cartridge form, which is really beneficial, especially for those who just really like the, you know, ease of use of using a cartridge. Next up, we have a Kobe ink, and this is number 14, Maya Lapis Luzali. And this ink is stunning. It is so beautiful and so saturated. I have really been enjoying my Kobe inks lately and am actually really tempted to get a full bottle of a couple of them, but their price point is really what just kind of halts me in my tracks because they are a bit pricier, at least here in the States. But the color of Maya Lapis Luzali is just a lovely gemstone-y sapphire blurple. It's just beautiful. It does have a bit of a sheen to it as well, but I'll talk a bit more about that once it dries. But this is just a very gorgeous blue color that has some purple undertone, a fun sheen, and just a really nice flow. Next up, we have a 3 Oysters ink, and this is just blue. And usually a company's ink that is just like a standard color, you know, blue, red, green, aren't very exciting. But I find with this 3 Oysters Blue, it has a dynamicness to it because it shades slightly from like a more, I guess, unsaturated cerulean blue to a bit more of a darker royal blue. The shading isn't substantial in the point of like when you write with it you get very different light to dark shades, but it does have almost a coloring shift in a full page of writing. It's very pretty. I will say this ink is a bit wet, which I have found some of the 3 Oysters brand inks are, but I don't really have any issues with this one drying for me. Next up, we have a papery Plume ink, and this is Forget Me Not. And when I tell you I am obsessed with this color, I am obsessed. So this ink technically may not fit firmly in the blue category. It has a very nice lavendery, like purpleness to it. Kind of like a blurple, if you will. I think I should just do a whole video on blurple inks, honestly. But yeah, this ink is lovely when it comes to the color. I find that in writing, if you have it next to something blue, it pulls out a lot more of the blue tones. And then if you have it next to something purple, it pulls out a lot more of the purple tones. It's just a really fun color, and it's just, yeah, I just love that it has a more lavender look to it, but it's still pretty blue as well. Next up, we have the ink of the year, and this is Pelikan Edelstein's Golden Lapis. And this is a lovely blue ink that's a bit brighter, has gold to greenish colored glitter in it, and then a reddish kind of halo-y sheen as well. I got the sample from Goulet, and it did not have a lot of shimmer in it, but so I'm sure if you get like a bottle of this or have a bottle of this, it would be much shimmerier. Man, that's a hard word to say. But it is a beautiful color. I find that the base of this is very similar to Konpeki. When I did my 30 inks 30 days recently, I compared the two of them, and the base color of this is very close to the Pilot Iroshizuku's Konpeki. It just has a golden green shimmer and then a bit more of a stronger sheen. I think it's a lovely color, and it did really well in my TWSBI Broad. When I wrote with it, I'm not in love. Like, I'm not like, wow with it. So I'm just going to finish off my sample and call it at that, but it is a very lovely shimmery blue color. Next up, we have a Pennonia ink, and this is number 4's. I think it's Danuvius, Danube. I'm still working on pronunciation, so if you know the correct way to say this, just, you know, let me know down in the comments. And while this blue has some really fantastic shading, I feel like, again, this one could fit in another category, maybe even a gray category, just because of how light it is. It's very similar to Diamine Celadon Cat, but the shading is much different. And I do find that this one has a little bit of a better flow to it in terms of writing. It's not as dry, but it's still on the drier side. Pennonia as a brand actually has a lot of different colors. They have shimmer mix-ins, they have just really cool things going on, and a lot of their inks have really cool properties like a shading or a sheen or something like that. So really happy with that, and I find that their pricing is pretty reasonable for the amount of ink that you're getting. The color of this, though, again, is more of that light dusty blue with a bit of a grayness to it, but the shading is a whole different scenario, so I'll wait to talk about that when it is dry. Next up, we have an ink that I have been absolutely obsessed with lately, and this is Robert Oster's Wind. To me, this is what I wish Sailor Manyo's Ha Ha actually looked like. So it starts off as this kind of baby blue, maybe slightly baby blurple blue ink, and then it shades to this pink color. It is so mind-bogglingly beautiful. I'm obsessed. The flow of this is super nice. It's really wet and just does a fantastic job. I've inked this before, I think in my Kaweco, and shown what that looks like on this channel, but it's just a lovely color, and I'm absolutely obsessed. I think there's a lot of other inks that are really close to this, you know, where they shade from like a light blue to a pink color, specifically ones like Sailor Manyo Haha, but this one is so legible and still a light blue color. It is just phenomenal. I'm obsessed. Next up, we have another ink that is really nifty, and this is part of the Sailor Ink Studio line, and it is number 743. With this ink, at first glance, it's like, ooh, look, another dark royal blue ink. Great. But no, this one is so cool. So when it officially dries, it has like a two-tone sheen situation. I've had it sheen red and I've had it sheen green. So it's just so cool. It's beautiful, and it's a darker ink, so I find this is a really great one for those who need a more legible writing ink that still has some fun properties. The only downside I find with it is that it is, again, a more pricier ink for the quantity that you're getting in a bottle. So it is a Sailor ink, which I find that their price point is a bit higher, but they just have so many different colors to pick from, and this one is just super unique, and I'm obsessed. Next up, we have a Troublemaker ink, and this is Abalone. And this ink is a pretty popular one in the fountain pen community when it comes to blue inks because of its shading. It has gorgeous shading, again, from like that more light gray blue color to pinky purpleness. It's really pretty. I, however, am not a huge fan just because it is a bit of a drier ink, which again is common with the Troublemaker shading inks. I think once I found Robert Oster Wind, I could just do away with this Troublemaker Abalone altogether, but it is a very beautiful color, and I can see why it is so loved. I think the shading is still a bit unique. It has a bit more of a range to it, but it is just a little bit too dry for my personal taste, but it is a very pretty dynamic color that fits into the blue category. Next up, we have an ink that was sent to me by Priscilla, thank you, and this is Vinta Lakbay. And I haven't put this in a pen yet because it's still pretty new to my collection, but I find that it is just incredibly unique because it is a blue ink with red shimmer. And I don't think I've ever seen that before, if I'm being honest. The base is a lighter blue, kind of like a sky blue, has a bit of a yellow lean, and the shimmer is, again, more of like a red, maybe even like a dark pinky rose gold, but bit more red. Flow wise, I think it's a little dry with dip nibs, so I don't really know how it's going to perform in fountain pens, and I haven't played enough with the Vinta inks to really just form a very firm opinion on them yet. But I will say I have seen from other, creators and also fountain pen ink reviewers that Vinta inks do evaporate in their bottles sometimes, so just keep that in mind if you purchase from Vinta, like in the bottle. I mean, I have the samples from Priscilla, so I don't really have anything happening with the evaporation situation. They're doing just fine, but if you have a bottle of Vinta ink, maybe you could confirm in the comments if they do have a evaporation issue or not, because I think that's something important if you're purchasing ink. And the last ink that I have today is another one I've been obsessed with lately, and this is Wearingeul's Dorothy from their Wonderful Wizard of Oz collection. And I would consider this probably a perfect blue-gray, maybe even a stormy blue. It has gray to like a darker gray-blue shade, and the base of it is a bit more of like a blue gray, like a blue toned gray. So this one could be, again, maybe in the gray family, but I still like to put it in the blue family. It is absolutely stunning in writing. I find that full pages of this just keep me intrigued while I'm writing. It just is beautiful, the different shading as you go. It's stunning. Flow-wise, it's actually great. I don't have any dryness with this one. I have experienced dryness in lighter Wearingeul inks, and I'm starting to think that's just really common with light inks in general, even though there are some brands that do them very, very well. But this ink is stunning. I love it, and I don't want to shut up about it. Okay, I'm gonna let them finish drying down, and then I will come back and we'll do some close-ups and zoom-ins, and then I will flip back to season 1 of blue inks that I did. I think I had like 2 videos of that one, and we'll compare some swatches of what I had from that time, but I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, I am back. Let's go ahead and zoom in, do some close-ups, talk about what I'm looking at, and then I will compare to season 1. So starting off, we had Anderillium's Flying Squid Blue. Love the saturation on this one. Love the darker red sheen. It's stunning flow-wise. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Jana, for letting me swap with you and sending me this one. I just adore it. It is such a gorgeous darker blue color. Then we had Birmingham Pen Company's Salted Sea Breeze. Again, this is my mix. If you want to go back to when I wet swatched this, I had the recipe there, I hope. But the shading in this is absolutely stunning. It is just a nice muted kind of greenish blue with a bit of a grayness to it as well. It's very, very pretty, and the haloing shows up really well in writing. Then we have Colorverse Rainy Day. This shades almost to a green gray in some areas. It's really cool. It looks like a storm cloud in the background, and then it has that, again, kind of greenish shading with a little bit of like a darker, like dark gray halo effect going on as well. The flow of this one, though, is a bit dry, which I talked about when I did the wet swatch. Then we had DeAtrramentis Atlantic Blue, and it does have a sheen. It has a reddish black sheen, but the color of this, again, is a nice saturated blue. It is a bit more true blue. It's not as green as like the Anderillium up here, and it's not as, I guess, yeah, green as the Endless Candy Sea down here either. It is a bit more of a natural blue color, and it is very dark, so it's really quite nice in comparison to some of these other ones. Then we had one of my favorites, Diamine Celadon Cat. The shading in this is just 10 out of 10. It's so beautiful. It is a bit dry, not as dry as I'd say the Colorverse one is, but you could always use something like White Lightning or an agent to make it a little bit better flowing for your needs. But I just like to put this in a wetter flowing pen, and it does very well. But the shading in this is phenomenal. Then we had Dominant Industries Milky Way Blue. You can definitely see the giant pile of red sheen on this. Unfortunately, I think my sample just does not have the shimmer that this ink has in the bottle, which is fine. It is a nice darker blue, rich color underneath, a very royal blue, and with the red sheen, it's just absolutely gorgeous. Then we have the Endless Alchemy's Candy Sea, which is very close to that Dominant Industries Milky Way Blue, but it is a bit more on the yellow-green undertone, and it does not have shimmer. I find that this sheen's very high, and it's beautiful on the Tomoever paper, but on other papers, it does not have this much sheen. So definitely consider that if it's something you really care about is the sheen, because certain papers do not show the sheen as well. Then we had Ferris Press's Storied Blue, which in comparison, like I said, it's very close to Diamine's Celadon Cat, especially in writing. It's just a bit more blue and doesn't have as high of a gray shade, but this one is even drier than the Celadon Cat. So if you're not a fan of dry inks, either steer away from this one or again, add that White Lightning or an agent to make it flow a little bit better. Then we have Kaweco's Royal Blue, lovely, lovely blue color with a bit of a blurpleness to it. It doesn't show the shading that I was talking about, the kind of like gray to yellow shade very well. It has kind of little bits of it here. I will say that only really shows up in big swatches like this. In writing, it looks pretty, universal. But the sheen on this is a bit more of a black color with a very tiny red hint to it, but I'd say black is primarily the sheen color for this one. Then we had Kobe's number 14, Maya Lapis Lazuli, and just look, okay, it's so pretty. The base of this is definitely sapphire. It's bright, vibrant, gemstony blue. It's very, very opaque, very saturated, and the sheen is a bit more of like that darkish red sheen, but it also has a purpley look to it sometimes. Like, I don't know, it's super unique. I've been really enjoying my Kobe inks recently. Then we had 3 Oysters Blue, and like I mentioned, it has an almost like light to dark shade going on, but it's not super strong. So in full pages of writing, you get kind of like this wash look like this, where it goes from light to dark, but in just like short instances, it just looks very blue. The sheen on this is very matte, and it is a bit more of a reddish color, but it's not so strong that it just takes over like the Dominant Industry and the Endless Alchemy on this other page. Then we have Papery Plume's Forget-Me-Not, obsessed. It's like a lavender color, blurple. On camera, it's showing up very blue, but in person, it's a bit more purple looking. I don't know what it is, but the camera just has a hard time with purples when there's other blues on the page. But it is a lovely color. It's pretty flat and just has a very minor amount of shading. Then we had the Golden Lapis by Pelikan Edelstein, which is the 2024 ink of the year for them. Absolutely stunning with this kind of like gold green glitter and the red sheen. And again, the base color of this is very similar to that of Konpeki by Pilot Iroshizuku. It is such a gorgeous color. I like it. I think I enjoyed it when I wrote with it, but I don't need to order any more of this color just because it's fun, but I don't think it's something I want to use all the time. Then we had Pennonia's Danubius or Danuvius, Danube. Again, pronunciation is not my strong suit there, but the color of this is more of a, I guess, green toned blue. Could be considered even a teal with the pink gray shading. I kind of like that I put it next to this one, but I kind of want to compare it to the other ones on this page. So you see how Celadon Cat and Storied Blue are a bit more, I guess, yellowy looking, and this one is a bit more red looking. So kind of take that with you will in base terms. I think in writing next to each other, they'd look very similar. So again, brand preference is probably what I go with here. But the shading is more of a pink gray versus a yellow gray like the other two. Then we had Robert Oster's Wind. Still so obsessed. This again is what I wish Sailor Manyo Haha looked like. Haha is just way too light for me, but this one is a lovely like medium light blue with pink shading, and the shading shows up all the time. It's so beautiful. Then we have Sailor Ink Studio 743, which I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but you can kind of see the shift of red to green sheen that it's got going on. It is so cool. It is so cool. The base color of this is a lovely dark blue, maybe even a royal cobalt blue sometimes, but the sheen on this is really what sells it for me. Just that it has a two-tone sheen is so cool. Then we have Troublemaker's Abalone, again, a nice super shader. This one is a little too dry for me, and I think compared to Robert Oster Wind, I'd much prefer the Wind, even though Abalone is considered a little bit darker of a blue. I just think that the flow issues that I have with this is what makes me not want to use it all the time. But the color is absolutely beautiful, and the shading is very strong and very lovely. Then we had Vinta Lakbay, again, a light blue color that is a bit more yellow based, a bit more of like a light sky blue with a green undertone. And this has that red or darker pink shimmer, which is entirely unique to this ink. I've never seen that before in a blue ink, so it's very cool. Haven't written with it though because it's still pretty new to my collection, so I can't really speak to how the shimmer does with the ink, if it like clogs or has any issues in pens. And then we ended off with Wearingeul's Dorothy. Absolutely one of my favorites. I love the blue gray. I love how it's kind of moody looking. It's just really cool, and the shading is absolutely lovely. Okay, now let's compare to season 1. So this notebook was the original Tomoe River paper, so it is a bit different, but we had the bright blues first. So some of my favorites on here are Pilot Iroshizuku's Konpeki, and then also the Sailor Manyo's Kunagi. Those two are probably like my most two used. I don't have my Pennonia Kekfeni Blue Light anymore, and then the Colorverse Supernova is absolutely lovely, but I did end up spilling more of this ink, which is fine. DeAtrramentis Columbia Blue Copper is gorgeous. There's not really a lot of blue inks out there with a coppery shimmer in them, and then Ferris Press's Tumbling Time Blue is just, you know, crazy, but it's also really similar to Diamine's Arctic Blast. So I feel like the blue with red and shimmer is very common now, but I don't know who did it first, so y'all can fight that out. And then we did a light blue one as well. And for this one here is Sailor Manyo. Oh yeah, Sailor Manyo Haha. See how light it is? But the base, like the shading in this is beautiful, but I think just in writing it's too light for me versus like the Robert Oster's Wind is just, it's just more up my alley, I guess. Other ones on here that are really nice are the Ferris Press Dusk and Blue, and also the Colorverse's Monkey Head Nebula Glistening. I think the Colorverse one I prefer a bit more. And then obviously Pilot Iroshizuku Amayuro is, you know, it's an Iroshizuku ink, and I feel like their inks are just phenomenal all around. I'm obsessed with them. Anyways, if you have any questions about any of the inks that I swatched today, let me know down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them for you. I'm getting close to the end of season 2 colors, just in that, you know, we've already made it all the way through the rainbow. There's only pink and red left, but this is not the end. I promise I will keep doing some more color families after that, but I kind of want to go into a vote here, if you will. So if you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and vote in the comments if you'd prefer to have a more selective color family. So something like, you know, dusty blues or, you know, muted pinks, like that kind of color family, or if you'd prefer to just go into brands, like overall, so like a full page of inks from Diamine or a full page of inks from Robert Oster or something like that. I'm definitely going to do both at some point. I just want to know what you guys want to see next, so go ahead and let me know about that down in the comments as well. Anyways, I'm going to end the video off here. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for swatching some inks. I hope you found something to add to your wish list, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.